Yeah, so I'm here with Michael, our developer evangelist, and we're going to talk a little bit about the pipeline editor, linting, testing your pipeline, all of that good stuff. So currently in the standalone CI lint, we have an option to simulate your pipeline. It's a bit of a weird user experience. There's just a checkbox that you check off, and it doesn't really tell you exactly what it does, but it adds some additional checks on top of the basic linting. It doesn't necessarily simulate your pipeline. So what it does is it simulates pipeline creation and only within a specific execution context. I think it's for Git push events and only for the default branch. And the idea behind this feature was to allow you to test your pipeline in different execution contexts. So basically, we want to build upon it, and we want to allow you to test your pipeline on different branches and following different trigger events, like whether it's a scheduled pipeline or it's a merge request pipeline, your pipeline might look differently. And the current implementation evaluates some logic. So it's not just syntax validation, but it also evaluates things like rules and exceptions and things like that. So we want to build upon it, but before we add it to the pipeline editor, I'm trying to gather more insights generally around how the linter and the existing validation features in the pipeline editor are used. And since you interact a lot with engineers who are just learning, getting started with CI/CD, and you use the pipeline editor in your workshops and things like that, I was wondering if you could share some insights and just your experience around how you use the linter. Because we have continuous validation in the pipeline editor. There's this status area where we tell you if the syntax is correct or not, and we show some basic errors there. But you can also click through into the lint tab in the pipeline editor that provides some additional output. So yeah, I was wondering if you could share a little bit. What is your experience with using that? What are the benefits for you of seeing that output? How can it be improved and so on?
Yeah, the reason why I jumped into the simulation epic was that I felt that this was aiming too big, and runtime simulation is different to you are analyzing the rules and generating the output or generating the compiled configuration, which is then sent from the server to the runner to execute. Oftentimes you have the problem you're building out your pipeline and it's more or less a static job stages environment. But in the end, you always you execute something, you download something, you provision cloud resources, you change something in your environment, and you expect it to behave the same. So everything is idempotent somehow. For example, when you use Terraform and the state backend and everything else. But it gets more complicated to actually test and simulate that. So stepping back and say, okay, I cannot really simulate a runtime environment right now. This is what staging is for, and you actually need to run the pipeline. But what is interesting for me, I don't want to run the pipeline yet. I want to see what I'm building. So have a visual builder, something like I'm writing the YAML code. I can see a preview how the stages and the jobs look like. So I think that's in the, there are too many tabs, to be honest. That's in the visualize tab. And when we are in the test tab or in the linting tab, I'm primarily interested in getting the green feedback or getting the feedback that the syntax is correct. And sometimes it's I made a mistake, and the editor is intelligent enough to tell me, hopefully, that there might be like in this scope, I'm not allowed to use script, or I'm missing script, or the job name is not allowed because it's a keyword or something like that. So everything like the config parser can give us as a result. It's amazing when I type it live in the editor. But on the other hand, oftentimes you copy something from a blog post or from somewhere else, and it's not like I continuously write in the pipeline editor. I'm copy pasting this, and I have found like this command, and then I'm forgetting about the indent. So like 2 spaces. And I think when we had been working with the Helm registry and the Terraform registry lately. I think Philip copied something from a different environment, and for some reason this didn't work. I think it was something related to the job name or something else. And from running the pipeline, it was not yet clear what does this mean. And when we moved it basically into the pipeline editor view and convinced Philip to actually try it out now and see what is going, it's much more approachable because you see the linting preview. You're looking at the error, and it might not be perfect. So the config parser can still be improved in certain ways. Different story, because this is a complex problem to actually write a config parser and develop a DSL. But in the end, you feel confident in seeing something. You can switch the tab in edit mode, fix it, commit it. You're waiting for the pipeline at the top to continue. I think this could be made more like when the pipeline is running and you're waiting for feedback, maybe make this more prominent. I think users might not see that this is actually running. So like, I don't know, it's there, I can see it, but maybe when I'm committing, something should, I don't know, more prominent pop-up, or just saying, okay, the pipeline is running now, we're actually running your code you just committed, and then you can continue. Sometimes it's also the workflow. Okay, I'm done in the pipeline editor, and the pipeline is running, and I'm not interested anymore in like adding something because I'm waiting for feedback. So what should I be doing in that break? Like the XKCD 303 compiling joke somehow, but maybe there is like filling the gap of I'm waiting for pipeline feedback, and now I'm in the scope of the pipeline editor. What else can the user do in the meantime? Like providing some real life feedback of not only the pipeline is running, but where are we at in the pipeline? This is a pipeline execution team's authority, actually, like bringing. I'm dreaming. It's like a waterfall model or a waterfall stream of stages, and basically it's moving, and I can see immediately, okay, the pipeline is running, and currently it's not in the first job but in the second job, because currently I need to like click on the pipeline icon which is running, or on the number, to actually see where the pipeline is at. And I feel like I don't like waiting, and I think nobody else likes to do that. But when I'm waiting, I might want to see a progress bar and not click 5 times to get into the pipelines view, but have it somehow at the top as like the merge trains are designed, or to be designed, just like see where I'm at. And if, for example, this is again something in execution, if the metric goes beyond, for example, 5-minute duration, it gets red, and I can see that. And maybe we can just reuse, sounds odd, maybe we can reuse what our pipeline execution team is currently developing for pipeline insights and efficiency, and just have a mini widget on top of the pipeline editor to visualize what's going on in the pipeline. Because if I know that the pipeline is just in the last stage or last job, I will continue working in the editor and see, okay, maybe there is something else I need to do. If there is not, we might provide an action or provide more. This is what's next. Thinking of like the visual slider on the right hand side, but I don't know if we should do pop-ups or tips, toolbars. I'm not really sure about it, but providing some actions, saying, okay, now the pipeline works. Did you think about adding security? Did you think about adding caching? Yeah, I don't know, caching. Something which can easily be added, and oftentimes it's maybe we can detect whether the SAS scanner is enabled, for example, and do that as a feature flag A/B test with users and see if they start doing it actually. So when CI security is not enabled, maybe like add a hint to do it. Thinking out loud.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's not written in stone. It's just I want basically as a beginner to know the best practices, and there are some things which we cannot pre-fill in a template. So I really love that it's like pre-fill, that it tells you so when you commit it, it works, and it gives you some insights. Where I want to go is like we discussed a while ago. It detects the source code and it proposes the template automatically. So when I have Node.js code, for example, I want to immediately have that populated or proposed, and a small pop-up which says me, hey, we detected that there is JavaScript or Node.js. We automatically applied the template for you. Here are the docs, the steps to do whatever. And maybe like link to a marketplace or link to a collection of templates or the drop-down. It gets problematic with monorepos with multiple source code variations, but in the end we need to start somewhere. So like the simple approach of detecting the file suffixes like .js, .cpp, .whatever could be a simple way to see if the idea works.
Yeah, we have plans to do that. For the pipeline status in the pipeline editor and allowing you to see the pipeline run, the first iteration will be adding the mini pipeline graph. So the mini pipeline graphs that you see on the pipelines index page, for instance, or we have it in many places in the UI. So at least you would be able to see the progress of your stages, and you would be able to click on the stage and open a drop down with the jobs. So you would be able to see which jobs are running and so on. So that will be the first step. And yeah, we'll sync up with Vitica as well on what's their status around the work on surfacing more insights around efficiency, because we've been getting lots of feedback that it would be very helpful.
And it kind of overlaps with the idea of simulating the runtime duration of pipelines, because when I was giving the pipeline efficiency talk in the past year, I often saw that, like, I don't know, it sounds odd, but if you're into critical path analytics and like calculating the minimum duration and the maximum duration of the pipeline, this is rather easy if you're using like sync dependencies and stages, but it gets more complex if you're using DAG and needs and async execution, and also, for example, the metrics builds or the parallel builds to actually speed it up. It gets more complex, and you really want to, like, first off, you want to see the duration, and then basically a calculation based on what is there, and say, okay, this is the minimum duration and this is the maximum duration, and have these metrics as values printed somewhere. It doesn't need to be beautiful. I just want to see them. And when I want to simulate a pipeline, it's like you have, let me see if I can find that. I do have This was the AWS user group meetup, the last one. Let me quickly share my screen. So I was looking at the deck graph, and when I start explaining like the critical path, I'm saying, okay, this is the huge long list, but this doesn't really provide me an insight when I'm using needs. So the critical path for me is actually the source code is tested for format and so on, and built. Then we run the unit tests, we compile something, and we run it. Basically, this could be optimized, but in the end, this is the critical path where I'm interested in. And if the pages report uploads, I might need them, but it's not important for me as seeing a result if my change in the source code actually worked in the merge request, for example. And I have that picture in mind of saying when I'm simulating this, I can maybe click on here and say this job now takes 30 seconds. And on the right-hand side, I have basically the numbers. And when I change it from 2 seconds to 10 seconds, the number goes up. And maybe the color gets red because the threshold for the max pipeline runtime is 1 minute. So I'm kind of, when simulating a pipeline or checking something, oftentimes it's like the runtime, the duration, because the runtime is easy to measure for us. We have that metric already. If we want to monitor the CPU usage or the compute resources being used or wasted by running the jobs, this gets more difficult because this needs to be collected by the runner. And the runner is not always the same, or there might be a multitude of runners in the cloud. And sometimes they take this job and then this job. So this is a little more complex to collect the metrics or to monitor the compute resources for the pipelines. But the duration is something which is rather easy to just say, okay, it's a static value for me. In production, of course, it's a runtime value, but I can use that maybe as a simulation mode to say, okay, if I optimize this, like the negated view, currently this compiled job, because it's a huge project, it takes 5 minutes. What happens if I optimize that to 1 minute? Does that change the overall pipeline execution? And this could be, I'm not sure if it will help everyone, but it could be a great idea to actually visualize what's there. And in order to get there, it would also be like needed, and I've discussed this with Vitika, to have a visualization of when the pipeline execution time for a job goes beyond a defined threshold of 1 minute or 5 minutes, this gets red automatically. And if I optimize it, it gets green. And so this could be a way of like finding ways to optimize it and simulate it. If we move into runtime simulation, we actually need to wait for output. If we do that, we I think I was distracted by this like notification. We actually need to throw away the pipeline result, because this could influence the merge request not being mergeable, or this could influence the pipeline history on its own, because I don't know if it's a practical example, but there might be situations where you have an SLA, service level agreement, or service level availability report on your pipelines. And if a specific percentage of pipelines are failing, this fails basically the SLA or the SLO, and this might bring you into problems, and you need to argue with your manager or with someone you're reporting to, say the pipelines are failing so often. So when we do a simulation for something at runtime, it might be a good idea to just say, okay, we are throwing away the result, so it's not affecting anything. It's run in a sandbox mode somehow. But again, it has the problem of when I provision a cloud resource, how can I mock that? Is this something I need to do in the simulation or not? So I'm not confident in calling something runtime simulation because it's a minefield to argue. So collecting different opinions on that and learning more would be a great idea.
Yeah, so right now we want to focus on like, let's just not call it simulation because it's confusing. I think we start calling simulation because we already have a feature that is called simulation, but I agree that it's misleading. It's not a simulation. That's why it was so confusing for me as well. And it's also not very well documented, like what exactly does that simulate your pipeline option does. But we want to focus on, for now, at least allowing you to test your pipeline in different contexts and allowing you to visualize the pipeline in different contexts as well. So that would still hopefully take us a step forward in terms of what you can validate in your pipeline. It would be a step up from just syntax validation.
Yeah, that's true. And to be honest, I have never tried the simulation mode in the CI linter. Probably because I didn't know what it does, or I feared that something breaks. And currently the CI linter is also hidden, or hidden. I've seen that you've opened an issue to fix the UX in that regard, coming from the deprecation request, but it's a different story. I'm fine with either what we can find. I'm thinking when we say we not only want to simulate a pipeline, but we want to run it and see how it behaves, and then tell the user what the behavior is. It also goes along with pipeline insights, so pipeline monitoring, pipeline tracing, because, for example, the duration of a job also is a timing point, which can be a trace. And this is also like, we sometimes get the request, when are you adding, for example, open telemetry into the CI pipelines to send the duration or send some metrics from the jobs from the pipeline to open telemetry and the consumers then? Because in 14.1 we have added the Datadog integration for CI, and this collects certain metrics from GitLab. This is something I don't know the technical details, how it exactly works. I haven't had a look yet, but it uses metrics which we potentially could also use in the front end, just for the job duration, or for sharing more details on how a simulation, or how I should avoid the term simulation, how this works and how you can influence that. And do I have a picture of that? A flame graph. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept, but when you're developing software, sometimes you have functions which take a specific amount of time, and when they're just executed once for runtime 2 seconds, it's totally fine. But when they execute it a million times, it might slow down your application. So you have a flame graph of the call stack, and you can see how often and how long an application is executed. And I'm thinking of like getting an idea. This job is running for 2 minutes. Okay, that's totally fine. But this job gets executed 10,000 times during the day. So it tremendously might slow down the pipeline, or it might affect what you're paying for AWS, for example, in the cloud, because it's consuming lots of resources. And I know that this is not 100% pipeline authoring, but potentially we have quite a few overlaps with pipeline execution in that regard.
Yeah, of course. We're very interested in pipeline optimization because, you know, pipeline authoring is part of pipeline optimization. So this is something like this area we will have to definitely collaborate on with pipeline execution team. Do you have any feedback around the current functionality of the linter, like the output that the linter provides? Do you see any ways to improve it?
I'm not sure if the linter directly is the one who. So for error messages, I sometimes would like to get it more verbose, not just one line and telling me what's there, but maybe like, I don't want to see a call stack that, or a trace or an exception. That's not what I'm thinking of, but I kind of want to get a suggestion what to fix, or a suggestion based on the scope to the documentation, saying, hey, you're using the rules in this scope, and the error is actually coming from the rules in the job scope. Here's the docs URL, because oftentimes when I see an error, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe I immediately know what the problem is, or the error message is so amazing that I can fix it immediately. But for a beginner, I said they might be looking up a workshop or looking up a tutorial on the internet, and it might not be up to date. So they are copying something and it doesn't work. And if you need to reverse engineer someone else's work, especially because the YAML is actually like writing code, it's hard to get there. And the other thing, so what I've heard is the linting and also like the merged YAML is super helpful when you're using templates and when you're trying to create reusable CI config code. Because reinventing the wheel is like, okay, copy paste works, but then you change it in the upper line, but not in the lower line. And it does, so it gets out of sync. And I don't know how we can do that, but I would love for us to statically detect if there is a duplication and automatically propose a template, or like a jobs template, and then maybe propose and saying, okay, this building block in the pipeline could be totally moved into a separate file, and this is the best practice. And I just remembered I sometimes get asked, what is the best practice to store local templates, CI templates? Is it .gitlab/CI, whatever you keep using at GitLab on the project, or do you suggest something else? So if we go ahead with the pipeline editor and maybe add a section of saying, hey, this is specifically CI templates, and these are stored in this directory because we say it is like that and documented, we could help everyone and say, okay, now it works, it's amazing, but we can help you clean up the code, clean up the CI configuration. This is a long-term vision or midterm vision. This potentially needs some logic which detects the application, and I can imagine that this is not easy to implement. But I think for beginners who don't know what's next after writing the first pipelines, it might be helpful.
That's a great idea. Yeah, that's in line with our vision around CI/CD templates, and we're planning to make it possible to easier use includes in your in the pipeline editor. So you would be able to not only apply whole workflow templates, but actually work with reusable templates as well.
I had a coffee chat with Jackie a while ago, or last week, I think. And we also talked around like the idea of a marketplace, or the idea of providing a location, not just like a repository view where you can download our CI templates, but to provide a way to contribute, to maintain, to make it easier, because we also not only have CI templates, we also have templates for pages, for example, which are similar, but sometimes not. And if we find a way to make it more visible to the user starting, I think it's a great way. I've seen that there is, I think currently there's a button in the pipeline editor for the templates. I would wish for a drop-down like the Web IDE, and I think there is an issue already. Because when I figured out in the Web IDE some years ago in the GitLab trainings I did for customers in my past job, there was it was so easy to just say, I'm not telling you in the exercise to copy paste something, which you need to look up. You just navigate in the Web IDE, you use the drop down. Hopefully no one has edited the template in the meantime upstream, and we just keep using that and just changing some configuration things. And from there, it's super convenient to teach a lesson on GitLab CI/CD, because there is an editor, you get everything you need, and I can retire some older slides of mine with the pipeline editor as well. So it's not this, I made a mistake. Of course, when teaching CI/CD, we make mistakes to prove that there is validation, to prove that there is something going wrong. But in the end, it's I really love what you're all doing with the pipeline editor, because it makes it super easy to explain, and also get people just started and say, hey, it's amazing that you're using a different SCM tooling and CI/CD tooling, but if you want to try GitLab, here's the pipeline editor, just go ahead. And by the way, I have a workshop which tells you even more about it. And you can learn at your own pace. And yeah, so I'm super happy where we are heading, and this totally aligns with my vision from like one and a half years ago.
That's great. Thank you so much, Michael, for all of your feedback. That was really helpful, as always. I'll keep you posted as we start diving more into developing some of these ideas. Many things that you mentioned, we already have some issues in Epics for, so I'll just make sure to loop you in when we start having those discussions. Yeah, thanks so much, and I'll give you the rest of your day back.
Thank you, and have a great day. Bye.
Bye.